Um, I will open up the April 6, 2021 meeting of the Hamilton Planning Board. It's a few minutes after 7 o'clock. On our agenda tonight, we have a preliminary review for 133 Essex Street Senior Housing Special Permit. We have a lot of people on tonight. We obviously can't get to everyone. We have limited public comment to 10 or 15 minutes tonight, given that this is a preliminary review. The applicant has not submitted a formal application at this point. This is a pre-application hearing. We had one a number of months ago. There have been a few revisions and they wanted to review that tonight with us. But in the future, when there is an application in front of the board, we will hear as much from the public as we possibly can. But just given everything going on tonight and that this is a preliminary review, we have limited it to 10 or 15 minutes. And I know that through Patrick, a few people from the citizens group have said that they will be speaking on behalf of some of that group. Whoever isn't muted, can they please mute? Thank you. Second on the agenda will be hearing a minor modification to the site plan and special permit for 354 Highland Street, which was the other senior housing at Canterbrook. Then we'll be talking about potential zoning bylaw changes and language that we've been working on. Later on, potentially, we've been discussing a zoning map change around the Winthrop School property. And then at the end will be other board business minutes and so forth. So Patrick, I know you've been talking with Jill, the applicant, and others. Can you just kind of bring us up to speed where we are for everyone on the call tonight? And then we can get into the presentation by the applicant.
Sure. Thank you, Brian. Following the comments that Brian had made, this is a preliminary application. The planning board, as a courtesy to project proponents who want to pursue complex projects, have the opportunity to come to the planning board to informally discuss proposed concepts, proposed projects relative to certain real estate here in town that they may be interested in. I can tell you in the 40 years that I've been doing this, there are a lot more possible projects and conjectured projects than there are real projects. So it's not a rare thing to see projects not go forward. But as I say, we provide the applicants with the ability to come to the board to get board reactions from their belief as to how the proposed project fits the zoning, fits the site. Brian also mentioned that we're trying to consolidate comments. I know that Kent Wasepka has been putting his comments together with the benefit of other folks. We'd like to recognize him first, but we'd like to have the applicant make their conceptual presentation first. Once that occurs, the board members will then ask questions of the applicant, and then we'll, once the board has finished with their review, again at this conceptual level, we will have 10 to 15 minutes of public comment.
Great.
All set?
Thanks, Patrick. And I just want to let everybody know this meeting is being recorded. Some people may not be able to get on or see it tonight. And Patrick, I mean, is it on the town website after this?
It will be, yes.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Okay, we can turn it over to Jill Mann, the attorney for the applicant.
Thank you. Good evening, Jill Mann here on behalf of Chabaco Capital Partners LLC, the proponent for this proposed project. If it would be possible, Mr. Ruffert and Mr. Stein, for me to be able to share my screen. And as an introductory, I would ask that the principal of Chabaco actually give you the overview of the project. I think it's a good introduction to Mr. Smith, and I think it would be nice for the all of the participants here as well as the board to hear that. But if it would be possible, I'm going to share my screen so that I can actually have the plans up. So if I may, Larry, can you start?
I can. Could everybody hear me? Because my camera is down tonight, so I apologize for that.
We can't. You're gonna have to speak up a little bit more, Larry.
A lot more.
Okay, Larry, we can't hear you at all now.
Is that better?
No.
No.
No? How's that? Is that better?
That's
Yes.
perfect. Thank you very much,
Okay,
Larry. If
yeah.
you may, if you can, I don't know what you can see on your screen, but right now, just for the purposes of the public, this is just an overview of the plan and the initial concept proposal. So go ahead, Larry, and then I'll take it back and we can go through all of the requirements of the senior housing bylaw. Thank you.
Great. So first of all, just introduce the team, development team. We have Jill Mann, who you've already met. Julia Dickinson's with us. She's our controller. Our site engineers on this project are from Granite Engineering, Brent Cole and Jeff Merritt, and our wetland specialist is Greg Hockmuth. The property owner, Kathy Rich, might have a few words to say tonight if we have time. And our team really is here to answer any questions the board might have. And I'll just give a quick overview of the company and then we'll give things right back to Jill. So to date, we've done 4 developments on the North Shore of Boston. The most local is the Village at Canterbrook Farm, just across the way on the other side of Hamilton from Chabaco Hill. Hatters Point Capital, that's in Amesbury, Mass. The Village at West Gloucester in Gloucester, and the Village at Magnolia Shores, for those that aren't familiar with our work. So we've seen the slogans around. It says Save Chabaco Trails and Watershed. And we believe that's just a little bit of an incorrect description. Our plan is to add trails to the Chabaco trail system and make it more accessible to visitors with parking and access that don't legally exist today. And I think Jill will highlight that in just a few minutes. Our plan is also to preserve and protect the farmland for years to come, which is not really the case today. We plan to offer the Meadowbrook Farms a 99-year lease at no cost. And we are interested in preserving the farmland and therefore save the bucolic view corridor off Essex Street. We also plan to fold the farm into a conservation restriction so that all the land will be preserved for years to come. We also plan, along with the walking trails that we hope to propose to build, we want to put a compliant conservation walking bridge on the site. Right now, there's an intermittent stream with some boards over it and really not professional and not safe. So all the open space, including the trail system, farmland, we propose to put in a conservation restriction, which is something similar to what we did on the land outside of Canterbrook. About 70% of the land on this development will be preserved for open space. We also plan to put a state-of-the-art watershed protection components on the site. The site engineering group right now is working on those, but basically groundwater recharge, drainage from the roadway, treated in a bioretention area, and rain gardens. Other proposed highlights include, of course, it's a plus 55. We're interested in proposing a senior housing project where no one less than 18 years old could stay on the premises for more than 30 days. Plus 55 housing is less, for those that don't know, is less dense and creates less disruption. 55 communities have less traffic, use less water, and are less impactful to other types of development. The people who live in these communities tend to be highly educated and civic-minded and typically will generally volunteer in town. This planned development has 32 buildings comprised of 50 units, a variety of smaller buildings with 2 bedrooms, 2.5 bath, 2-car garage, and designed to age in place with all the living area on the first floor. And aging in place today is more important than ever, considering the cost of end of life. We also plan to have a traffic study done. And of course, I believe this board is going to ask for a peer reviewer to look at that. The community be run by a condominium trust comprised of homeowners. So even after we leave and our construction's done, we'll be ensuring the grounds are kept immaculate. All roadway lighting designed will be constructed with dark sky compliant lighting. So I think there's a host of financial benefits to the town of Hamilton. And you know, with the COVID-19, we believe that town budgets have been decimated, and there's a real need for tax revenue increases in towns and cities across the state. And once completed, this community will generate approximately $735,000 a year in real estate tax. You know, and I always ask boards, what other revenue source do you have that could go that far? And this, I believe, $735,000 a year will save many police officers, firefighters, and teachers that could not happen with another age-restricted community. I'm sorry, with any other community except for age-restricted community. In addition to that, there'll be a $350,000 one-time payment to the town based on fees, building permits, and the like. And we will also be making a contribution to the Hamilton Affordable Trust of $1.5 million. In addition, we plan to rebuild the entire rock wall along Essex Street and clean up that entire area, which has been a kind of a mess for years. So in essence, we're here to listen to the concerns of abutters and of course the board, and any reasonable items that we can mitigate, we will do our best. So Jill, I'd like to bring it right back to you, and thank you, everybody.
Sure. I mean, the purposes of tonight's meeting really for the pre-application are to comply with all of those components of the open space farmland. That's just how it works. So we're really applying under the senior housing bylaw, which is section 8.2. But this particular hearing, we're complying with the requirements of 8.1.7. So the general intent of tonight is to present a very broad overview. So we're outlining what are the important resource areas. So as you can see from the plan, we've outlined this, there is a particular component of the property that has a little bit of the groundwater protection overlay district. And we show that, and it's over in this area here. I can't, you can see the, let me see, I'm sharing my screen, but let me annotate. So you can see where the groundwater protection district is right around here. So basically that's where it is. The groundwater protection district is all in this area. So basically, as you can see, we're staying away from that. In addition to the groundwater protection district, we show you all of the wetland. Now we have not yet delineated the wetland, but it's very, very clear where the wetlands are, and the flags have been installed, and we're actually going through a process with the Conservation Commission to be able to get a determination that this project doesn't affect them at all. Our intent for this particular development was to avoid using any resource areas, including the buffer to resource areas. So what you will see on this plan, and again, I'll annotate, is here's the wetland. If I could annotate, I would have, right? So here is the wetland, all in this area, and we show all of the buffers to the wetland. And we do not go within 100 feet with our project. So the way it works is, as you well know, 50 feet is to be completely undisturbed. You can't do anything within it. That's going to be permanent. Houses have to be 75 feet away. And we have honored that and made sure that we aren't going to have any impact in even the buffer zones, so that we will have no issues with the Conservation Commission or with any wetland component or resource area. The other really important factor that we obviously want to look at it in the beginning stage is our trails. So, you know, a lot of these people tonight are going to be talking about the trails and they want trails. And Ms. Rich, as well as her attorney, Marshall Handy, are going to have a very small conversation about that. And I'm going to direct it over to them. Mr. Ruffett, I would ask, and Mr. Stein as well, would it be preferable to have them do it now, or would you like me to complete my presentation under the preliminary application, just outlining those requirements?
I'll defer to the chair.
Yeah, thanks, Jill. I think you can finish your presentation and then we can turn it over to them.
Okay, thank you very much. So basically, we do show our trails. We have over close to a mile of trail on the property itself. And I'm going to clear my drawing and I'm going to re-annotate. So here's the trails that we are proposing to include. And that's the real trails. I mean, you know, there's the trails that are going to meander throughout the project, as you can see. This will provide access to the farm stand. Here's the farm stand operation. And if we are allowed to do so, we would even potentially create some sort of a little access point so that people can go to the farm stand, even accessing these trails. The beauty of it is that we are going to be connecting Chabaco all the way over to the other parts of the property. And the public is going to be welcome to walk the sidewalks that we have within the development. There's no intent to deny the public the right of access throughout what we would consider to be public areas. Despite the fact that this is going to be a private development, the roadway will be privately maintained, repaired, and owned. It is going to be open to the public so the public can enjoy the amenities. There's no desire to turn that out. This particular community wants to become part of the Hamilton community and wants to integrate, not exclude or be exclusive. So we are addressing the trail issue and connectivity with regard to the properties that are abutting. As far as public safety, traffic, Larry hit on that. Just so everybody knows, a senior housing development generates 50% of the water consumption, waste, and traffic. Sometimes it's even, actually for traffic, it's less than half for what the amount of traffic is generated for these types of development. Despite the fact that they generate sometimes in excess of, well, the same tax dollars, but actual benefit to the community, which would mean tax dollars versus tax consumption. These developments are probably 80% greater than any other development you'll see, because there is no consumption relative to the schools, and there is no consumption relative to having to have the DPW maintain, snow plow, and or come through with anything to maintain the stormwater. And we will address more of the safety concerns via traffic with a full-blown traffic report, as this board always requires us to do. As far as the preservation of open space and the dedication to some sort of resource area, it's the intent and the desire to basically continue farming this area. I know there's a big concern, and Hamilton is a big right to farm community, as it should be. It's a lot of open space, a lot of farmland. So we intend to enter into a very long-term lease with the Vandy family so that they have the right, for as long as they should choose, and to operate a farm in this location. We have no desire to see that go away. And we believe that's a big part of the character of this part of town. So we want to support and endorse it. In addition to that, the balance of the area, which amounts to about 40 acres, will be dedicated to open space. We far exceed the required 15% of open space, and more than 50% of the open space is going to be upland. So we meet all of the criteria for providing that. The affordable housing benefits, as Mr. Smith alluded to, we're making a payment in lieu. As it was experienced with Canterbrook, which I actually permitted as well, Canterbrook could not have affordable housing because it's a 55 and older development. And DHCD, when you're trying to do what they call a local initiative plan or a senior housing plan, which this is, you're not allowed to prohibit housing for families, which means DCHD will only allow you to say it's 55 and older if you allow children, which belies the point of having a 55 and older. So we will make the housing contribution pursuant to the rules, which is the equivalent dollar contribution, which is the 1.5 million. We talked about the revenue generation, which is clear. Just for general purposes, I just want you to know that we went through that vetting process. So we reviewed all the purposes of the senior housing. To provide for more flexible, provide for less sprawl, provide for maintaining rural character, creating open space, and all of those components worked into our development plan. In addition, we did the analysis relative to, what's the development concentration. So the town very appropriately said, listen, we don't want to have a whole bunch of senior housing because we know we need to absorb this type of housing. So we made sure that we had less than the required housing per year, which is no more than 50. We did the analysis to ensure that we were more than a mile away from any other housing development that was senior housing. And that's basically how we determined this property would in fact be eligible for that type of use. In addition to that, we made sure that we had a mix of housing. We didn't want to just have single family. We didn't want to just have duplexes. And in our experience and in our marketing plans, we find that the mix works best. So that's what you see here. And we did do the analysis regarding the developable acre concept and how many units we could actually have on this property. And while this property would generate the ability to have density of 100 units, we obviously, pursuant to your bylaw, limited it to the 50. So this property is much larger and permits much more density absent the requirements that we are following. So we're putting in 50 units. They're a combination of single family and duplex. And basically that's it. As you can see, we're having a looped roadway, and that roadway, the total area of the roadway is about from the entrance point down is about 1,200 feet. This entire road is about 24 if you measured the whole length of it, including the loop. And then this particular cul-de-sac that projects out is about 500 feet. So we even would meet the subdivision rules and regulations, although they aren't applicable because this is a site plan approval. And at this point, if I may, Mr. Stein, I would love to be able to turn this over to Kathy Rich. And then after she and Marshall are done, we can have the engineer on board to answer any questions that this board may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill.
You're welcome. I don't know if Ms. Rich heard me.
I did.
There
Can
we
you hear
go.
me? Okay, sorry. And I don't know if I'm on video, but I had a problem getting on because there are over 100 people on this call.
You are. We can see you and hear you perfectly. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jill. I want to thank everybody tonight for just listening to me for a few minutes, but just to give you a little bit of history is that over 60 years ago, my parents bought this parcel of land. Actually, they bought 2 parcels of land, but they kept this particular parcel of land for a special vision that they had, and it evolved over times to assisted living to senior housing to this particular development that my brothers and I have envisioned to honor my parents' wishes for a 55+ community. Since their passing in 2012 and 2014, my brothers and I have met with a variety of groups, and we are very happy to be a partner or a development partner here with the Restoration Capital. And we really appreciate all that they have done in developing this plan that goes so far beyond what we even anticipated with this 55+ community, which meets the needs of the community with financial contributions, with great planning, and the building and the maintaining of legal trails for the community, and the preserving of the farmland for a very, very long-term lease. Very, very positive. My brothers and I are very pleased to have joined in an agreement with them. And really it's a plus, a win-win for the town. I will tell you that there has been some disheartening, situations that have occurred over the years, partly of the trespassing on the property, the destruction of the no trespassing signs, trees being cut illegally, wetland flags being taken down. My family has been attacked verbally by people, and it's just not very nice. We have done our best to come up with a great scenario for the town, and I'm hoping that everybody will join in with us in this excitement. We're very excited about the farmland being preserved, and I'm sure that the Vandy family is also excited about that as well in this proposal. And so that's basically where we're at. And we think that we've found a great partner to join in developing our land, our private property that will be a jewel to the town in this development. Thanks, Jill. And thank you, Planning Committee.
Thank you, Kathy. Jill, who else was going to speak on your behalf?
Jill, you're muted.
Sorry. We have Mr. Ball's attorney present. I don't know if the board wants to hear from him relative to the access issues, or if that should come up if and when the board has a question, or if an abutter has an issue.
Wait, I think we're gonna, I think that's probably gonna be a question, so I have no issue hearing him address it right now, if he can.
Sure. So if I may, Attorney Handley, are you there, and could you
I am.
speak? There you go. Thank you very much.
I'm Marshall Hanley. I'm an attorney in Beverly with Hanley and Cox. As Ms. Rich has said, the Rich family interests have had this property for over 60 years. We've done the title on it. There are no grants of easement or private trails. This is a posted private property that has been assessed as private property and taxed as private property over the last 60 years. There are numerous incidents of trespassing and tearing down of postings and flags, illegal bridging of wetlands that the Rich family has worked diligently to control and limit. But be that as it may, the trespass continues. The discussion has been had with Greenbelt and other preservation interests to acquire property that they haven't seen fit to do it. The town of Hamilton hasn't acquired any interest in the property, so it remains a private posted property that is now poised for development in a way that can accommodate and will accommodate, if this development moves forward, a reasonable public access that is not in violation of posting and trespassing laws as the current access is. I'm here to respond, but pretty much it. There are no grants of easements that would interfere with this development.
Great. Thank you, Marshall. I will open it up to questions from the board at this time.
Rick Mitchell here. I have a question, and this might involve your engineer. And I don't know if you've gotten to this level of detail yet on the treatment of the wastewater. Jill, have you gotten to that level of detail in terms of the type of system you're thinking about using?
For the septic system, that would be Greg Hochmuth. We have just started, and Brent and Cole. Brent, I think you were working with Greg to design that septic system.
Yeah, it's for the record, my name is Brent Cole with Granite Engineering. It's very preliminary stages at this point. We're continuing to work through the engineering.
Okay.
I believe,
So-
have we done testing though, Brent?
We have.
There you go, Greg.
I can speak to that. Good evening. For the record, Greg Hochmuth from Williams and Sparagus. I was the one that was out there with the Board of Health doing the soil evaluation. We were out there a few weeks ago. We tested behind the farm stand in the area on the plan where you see that proposed box on the bottom left of the plan. We did a series of 12 deep holes and 6 perk tests. The soils over there were great. Loamy sands, some coarse sands and gravels. Water table down towards the bottom of the field was somewhat high, within 4 feet of the soil surface. But the slowest percolation rate we had was 4 minutes an inch. So very, very decent. And we had adequate depth. Most of the holes we were able to dig 10 feet plus. But as Brenton just mentioned, we're still in the preliminary stages and nothing's been actually designed yet. But we do know we have adequate area in that location.
Okay, thank you. Oh, and one more question. I know Jill and Larry, we talked about when we saw this the first time, I suggested the idea of connecting the trails with some sort of parking area so that people who wanted to access the trails that are being proposed would be able to drive to that location and then walk the trails. Is that incorporated in this plan?
There you
Okay.
go, right here.
Can you scroll that up?
Yeah, I've got to shut down this. I'm going to move this. Yep. Oops. I have to undo that. I have to stop my annotating before I can do that. So I apologize. Oh, and if I could stop the annotation, it would definitely be helpful.
Okay, so those are the proposed. It looks like, oh, there you go.
There we go.
Looks like there are what, 6 spaces there?
That's correct. There are 6 spaces as you drive in off Chabaco Road on the right-hand side, and you could actually see the trail connection goes back up the screen, then to the left, and comes back into the existing trail.
Got it.
Thank you.
Got it.
Right here.
Okay.
So we have the trail kind of bends like this.
Yep. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the board members?
I had just a quick question on wastewater disposal. So this is basically a communal septic system that collects the wastewater from the 50 houses. Is there going to be any treatment, or is it going any primary treatment, or is it going directly in tanks and then out to fields?
So we haven't actually got that far yet, but with developments like this in the past, we've typically had tanks for each unit that would discharge to a collection system that would ultimately end up in another tank. And in this case, it would be pumped to the new location. There's no pre-treatment anticipated for this location. It should comply with all the state and local setbacks.
Okay.
I know Canterbrook was a different story. I believe that had a pre-treatment device.
Yes, it did.
Yes.
I mean, is that something you'd be willing to do if, well, I mean, obviously if the Board of Health requires it, that's one thing, but given that, we're fairly close to the wetlands here and there's a fair amount of them, is that something you'd be willing to do anyway?
It's going to be, I think I have to defer to Greg, but it will be dependent on the design. And if it's a requirement and the Board of Health thinks it makes sense, we're going to do, we're going to act with the direction of the board. Larry, I mean, I think you agree with that?
Absolutely. If it does make sense for extra belt and suspenders, Brian, that's something we would entertain.
Yeah, we're the planning board. I'll defer to the Board of Health on that, but I just wanted to just clarify. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And I think you can rest assured, as we have with other large projects of this, that we will be asking you to pay for independent, objective, third-party review of all the engineering and site work and traffic study as well. So, I mean, that's kind of a given.
Absolutely. We expected that.
We understand that.
Mr. Chairman, this is Patrick again. I just wanted to let you and everybody know that our Zoom programming capacity is for 100 attendees. We have met that mark, so the system's not letting anyone else in. If this were a formal application, we would have to suspend voting because it wouldn't be a fair public hearing. But since, again, this is a preliminary review, there are no votes that are going to be taken anyway.
Right.
So I assume, Patrick, that for the public hearing process, that the license will increase the number of people who can attend via Zoom?
I'll have to address that with the town manager.
I'm sure we can assure the public that that will be taken care of and that anybody who wants to attend will attend and can attend.
Right.
I think you're right, Greg. I think we have to do that.
That's not optional.
It can be
Yeah,
accommodated.
it's not a choice.
Any other questions from board members?
I wanted to ask for a clarification or further explanation as to why the choice was made not to include affordable housing within the project and rather elect for payment in lieu of.
Sure, Mr. Ballou. The reason we do that is because the government entity that actually approves the ISH. So when you go and you want all these affordable units, you're doing it because you want to have it count towards your requirement of 10%. You are not entitled by DCHD to have an age-restricted unit for affordable purposes, nor can you have an affordable unit in an age-restricted community at all. So what I had actually submitted, and I can put it on the screen because I do in fact have it. 1 second, let me get that. There is a senior, let's see, here it is. So this is the local initiative that basically says the restrictions on children in age restricted 55 plus housing. It says that you are not permitted to prohibit families or children under the age of 18 if you are going to have those units approved as affordable units under a local initiative program. It just is not permitted. And that's basically what this particular policy sets forth. This policy had always, believe it or not, been in place, but it was never enforced by DCHD. So at the time we had Canterbrook approved, I think a lot of people will remember this. At the time we had Canterbrook approved, this policy, oh, excuse me, I wanted to make it smaller so you could read the whole thing. This policy had not been applied. But when we went to put the first deed rider on the first unit, DCHD rejected our plan and told us we couldn't do that. So in order to give the town an equivalent of what would be an affordable unit, we're required to provide a certain amount of money per unit. So it's 15%, which actually ends up being, I think it's 8 units, right, Larry? And when you do the math for the housing median income, it comes out to $1.5 million in contribution. And the reason that it's a very high number and is actually greater than was originally proposed, I think actually Mr. Stein was the one who proposed it at town meeting, that it needed to be increased because it just wasn't sufficient to buy units and to allow for the buy downs of age restrictions and deeds. And that's why the amount of money is at that level even. I don't, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks.
Thank you.
Can you talk a little bit about preservation of trees and what you'll be doing there? I mean, obviously you'll be taking a fair amount down, but
Sure.
just in general, what you might be trying to preserve?
Absolutely. So what you can see on this plan, and here I go with my little annotation tool, this line here is all, we're keeping all of the existing tree buffer. In here, we're actually going to keep it all as well. We just don't show it because I don't know why we don't show it, but this will be kept also. And then the tree buffer in this area will be kept, come around, all of this will be kept. The tree buffer is going to be kept in this area. When we put in the, these trails, we intend to do them as more meander naturalized trails. So we'll create an area to walk, but we will not cut down trees to create those trails. So those trails are going to be very, all over the place. They're going to come in, they're going to go around, they're going to come around, because we're going to avoid trees and avoid any kind of naturalized feature that needs to be preserved. But so you're seeing all out here is everything that's going to be maintained and not cut down. And then in here, this area, we have to clear to put the septic system in, and then we will leave tree line around it in this area. We'll keep the tree, and we'll keep the trees all around the back. So the property will have a tremendous amount of tree line retained. You
I
can
think
see.
what you're doing with the trails is going to make for a very interesting scenario for recreation, walking those trails. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you.
Are you going to be required to do blasting work to make the area where the housing is going to be accessible for foundations and sewer pipes and that type of thing? And if so, have you done any studies about the effect of runoff from that initial blasting and site work?
Sure. So I'm going to let Larry talk to more of that, and maybe he would even want Tom Schlosser. We've only done an initial investigation. We haven't, and Brent perhaps too, we haven't obviously done all the testing that's necessary, but we have done some. So I'm unsure if it would be Brenton or if it would be Larry.
So I could start, and then Brent, I'll let you jump in. We have done a lot of soil samples throughout the community. And there is most definitely will be blasting because there's a lot of ledge on the property, but our goal is to minimize the blasting wherever we can. And Brent, you might want to talk a little bit more about just the blasting process in general.
Yeah, sure. We're at the very preliminary stages of analyzing what effects the potential blasting have and how much blasting is actually required. Blasting efforts are not cheap and obviously not ideal for developments and stuff, but we're obviously planning on working with the land and working with a reputable blasting contractor to best provide for this type of situation.
And I will add too, we've done I personally have been associated with a lot of projects that have had blasting, and recently actually is working with Brent on a project in Wilmington where we had to blast. We'll hire a licensed company. That company will have an insurance policy, a very large insurance policy. The process is when you are going to blast, you get a permit from the fire department. The blasting company works with them. You do surveys of the area. You assess the properties that are adjacent to the community. You assess your own property, and you ensure that there's a detection device to monitor seismic activity. So blasting will cause some reverberation. So in order to ensure that you do not damage someone else's property, you put these seismic counters in. And blasting isn't like it was even 10 years ago, not even 5 years ago. They do it now in very small increments, and they do something called peeling it in order to minimize the amount of impact to anyone around them. And that will be done in concert with the fire department to the extent there's blasting to be had. How much, we don't know for sure, but we do know, Ms. Crouch, that there will be some. Thank you.
Anything else at this point from the board? Last chance. Okay, since I'm not hearing any more questions from the board members, I will open it up to the public comment. And I know that Patrick said that, and I don't see him on the screen right this second, but was it Kent that was going to speak?
Yes.
Great, feel free, Kent.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ruffert, Mr. Stein, and the planning board for the opportunity to make some initial comments on behalf of our neighborhood group. So hello, my name is Kent Wasepka, and I live on 74 Chabaco Road. So you've probably seen the signs, and I want to note that as of this morning, we represent 641 Hamilton residents who have signed our petition objecting to this project. We also represent 185 distinct donors to our effort. We believe, frankly, the proposed development is inconsistent with several parts of the senior housing section of the Hamilton zoning bylaw and the Hamilton wetlands bylaw. To begin, we believe the proposed cluster development is inconsistent with, if not completely contrary to the intent of the senior housing bylaw. The proposed project is unquestionably not directed to create affordable and moderately priced homes, and any claim of providing market rate accommodation is simply not credible. Do $1 million 2-bedroom condos qualify as market rate housing? Will any middle income residents be able to afford to live there? Another stated goal of the senior housing bylaw is to promote greater flexibility to protect natural areas and to utilize land, quote, in harmony with neighboring properties. The opposite is clearly true here. Putting a 50+ unit luxury condo development in the most rural area of Hamilton with exceptional environmental and recreational resources, much of which will be bulldozed, clear cut, according to Jill, blasted or paved over, is neither protective nor harmonious with the current character of this sparsely populated neighborhood. The proposed development, under the guise of smart growth and environmental protection, articulated as key goals of the senior housing bylaw, attempts to exploit Hamilton's cluster zoning that is intended to preserve environmental resources and open space. Rather than supporting these important objectives, the project seeks to maximize construction and unit count on essentially all developable land on the parcel. As the planning board is aware, the Hamilton Wetlands bylaw places strict limits and restrictions on any work in or adjacent to wetland areas. Among other restrictions, as we've heard tonight, that bylaw imposes a no build and no disturb resource area extending 75 feet from identified wetlands. Almost all of the area of the property outside of the proposed development is wetland, buffer, or within the groundwater protection overlay district. This means that conventional development under the existing zoning designation for the site, roughly an acre per lot, would likely result in far fewer homes developed with an equal or reduced environmental footprint. In other words, the developer is attempting a bait and switch strategy that would actually increase the build out and construction on the site under the rubric of maximizing recreational environmental protection. Planning board should carefully consider whether this project, in seeking high density, high impact development under the cluster housing exception to the existing zoning classification, constitutes code exploitation or conformance. How many units could actually be built and where under the existing zoning classification of this parcel? As you know, the town of Hamilton, and we've talked about this, is well below the affordable housing requirement. As it stands, the development will exacerbate the problem. If allowed to go forward, we believe the development in some way should be required to include at least 10% affordable housing units. Of particular concern to me and my neighbors who rely on private wells for our drinking water is the volume of bedrock to be blasted and removed from the site. Our rough estimate is many thousands of cubic yards of rock. I don't know what this effect will have on my family's drinking water, but I'll tell you, I'm really worried about it. We request that the planning board require the developer to undertake a bedrock groundwater study as allowed for in the bylaws. The proposed development has sewage disposal, as we saw, on the opposite side of the property, requiring an exceptionally long sewer pipe and extensive wetland crossings. According to the US EPA, average sewage output for 50 residences is just over 3 million gallons per year. How can the developer ensure the safe disposal of 3 million gallons of septic waste in an environment largely made up of wetlands and ledge? In addition, the proposed leaching field is to be located adjacent to a working farm and irrigation pond. I wonder what the health and public safety implications are of discharging septic leachate near a working farm. Forests are naturally very good at absorbing stormwater, but once clear cut, how will the developer ensure that stormwater runoff from the hardscape and fertilized lawns does not pollute either the aquifer or the Beck Pond Chabaco Lake water systems? How might the septic leachate from 50+ homes affect these local surface and groundwater resources? What protections do abutters like me, reliant on private wells, have against contamination? The proposed project claims credit for preserving natural trails and open space, yet, as we all know, it will destroy a number of key trails that have been notoriously and consistently used for more than 50 years. Lastly, Chabaco is a quiet street. Those of you in town know this. In addition to the prospect of many years of construction traffic, the proposed development will almost triple the number of homes on the road. What are the developers' plans for this traffic flow? Hundreds of Hamilton residents are highly concerned about the negative impacts that might result from this project if it is allowed to go forward in anything like its current proposed size and configuration. We hope the planning board will give careful consideration to all of these issues and concerns. Thank you very much. And I know that my neighbor, Heather Ensworth, has some additional comments, if that is possible.
It is. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Kent, and I thank the planning board for this opportunity to speak. I wanted to follow up on Kent's comments to highlight the environmental impact of this proposed development. The 133 Essex property is part of the fragile and valuable Chabaco Woods and watershed ecosystem. This is a rare and critical conservation area and habitat for many at-risk plant, bird, and animal species, including pink lady slippers, salamanders, black-pole warblers, flying squirrels, the brown bat, and many other species. It is unique because of its rare combination of deciduous and coniferous forest and wetlands. And it's a particularly important habitat for migrating and breeding birds in Massachusetts. Over 220 bird species have been identified there. This is also a crucial water resource for Hamilton, Manchester, and Essex. And the proposed development, with its blasting of granite ledge, clear cutting of trees, and storm runoff, present a serious danger to the area wells and the town's water supply. It is important to note that the wetlands are all interconnected. Harm to one area affects the entire watershed and water supply. Damage to one part of this ecosystem harms the whole. The proposed development would harm the neighborhood, endanger valued town assets, including its critical water supply, the trails, and working farm, and damage, if not destroy, a valuable natural habitat and conservation area for future generations. Those of us who live here and care about this land would love to come to a solution that is good for all. We support the current owners in receiving a fair and reasonable value for this land, and for Hamilton to be able to preserve and protect this critical watershed and water supply, an important town recreational and environmental resource. And for those of us who love this land, we want to protect a critical and unique habitat for the birds, animals, and plants that need this land to survive, and for our children and our children's children to enjoy this unique and beautiful land. To allow this large-scale, intense, clustered, and destructive development is too high a price for Hamilton to pay. The tax revenue from this proposed development remains uncertain and is a poor compensation for the damage that would be done. Let's look at other options that allow the protection and preservation of this rare and precious natural treasure. The choice for Hamilton is smart growth or short-sighted growth. Thank you for this time. And I'd like to now introduce my neighbor, Ani Sarkisian, who has just a few more comments.
Thank you, Heather, and thank you to the planning board for your time. My name is Ani Sarkisian. I'm representing Save Chabaco Trails and Watershed along with Heather and Kent, and I live on Chabaco Road myself. As we mentioned, one of our biggest concerns for this project is runoff and its management and how that will impact the topography and wetlands. of the area. Restoration Capital has promised that each of the proposed structures will have a lawn, which does not grow naturally in the woods and would require an enormous amount of topsoil to be brought into the area. And topsoil is particularly susceptible to surface runoff. It will undoubtedly require fertilizer as well, which would introduce serious levels of nutrients into the woods, whether chemical or organic. The problem with that additional nutrients is that it can cause the wetlands and streams to become overgrown, reducing the flow and the ability of the system to filter water. Well-functioning wetlands save municipalities a significant amount of money by filtering water naturally before it even reaches a treatment plant. Conversely, it is extremely expensive to taxpayers and dangerous to citizens should any of these chemicals need to be removed from the groundwater. Typically, it is nitrogen that would have to be removed, but Restoration Capital would be completely within their legal rights to use phosphorus, which is widely banned in Massachusetts, except in the instance of establishing a brand new lawn in its first year. There is a loophole in that requirement. Of course, every responsible developer takes care to establish a stormwater management system, which is what Restoration Capital has promised. But they are in no way perfect. For example, we can look to the Spring Hill development in Wenham, which as recently as April of 2020 was experiencing such problems with erosion that the town had to issue a cease and desist order until the problems could be addressed and corrected. Clearing 20 acres for this development will remove an entire section of the tree canopy. When this happens, it will raise the temperature of the soil and the air, which will remove moisture from the soil, lowering its fertility and making it more susceptible to runoff, and contributing to tree death in the process. The trees are what is holding the hill together. And in this period where in the past few years, we've experienced more severe droughts and more severe storms, a severe drought followed by a severe storm could result in even more storm runoff all at once, which could overpower a stormwater management system. And with them blasting the ledge so that they can build on top of it, it is not unreasonable to be concerned that even with appropriate stormwater management, chemicals and nutrients can still seep down within fissures of the bedrock into the groundwater below. I'll get into more about habitat fragmentation next time, but these buffers of trees, while being lovely and cosmetic, are also a safe haven for the white-footed mouse. Habitat fragmentation is directly connected to Lyme disease, which is an enormous problem in our area. And when you're clearing a large area of wild space and leaving these small areas of buffer, what you're doing is creating an area where white-footed mice can breed in safety, and they carry the Lyme tick. And so you're basically creating pockets of a large public health concern in an area where it was largely managed by the ecosystem before that. The more exposure wild spaces have to human land uses along their edges, the more long-term changes we will see in the remaining landscape. And in conclusion, we are talking about removing 20 acres of carbon-reducing, oxygen-creating, water-filtering trees and vegetation in favor of million-dollar structures that destroy habitats and hold carbon and heat, surrounded by lawns that essentially do the same thing. It is impossible for this to happen without directly impacting Shabako Woods, the watershed, and the biodiversity in the region. We ask that the planning board examine every one of these concerns thoroughly before deciding whether to issue permitting, and we thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. We've reached our 15 minutes of comment. I want to thank all three of you for preparing those comments, and I'm sure we'll be hearing more from you in the coming weeks once we have an application. I'd like to thank everyone on tonight for coming, and I do want to stress that once the applicant has applied, notices, proper noticing will be sent to all abutters within 300 feet. All meetings will be posted. All meetings will be public, and they will be in this format, I'm assuming, for the near future. And, like was said, it will be a lengthy process to examine everything that's been talked about tonight, to have, peer review of various engineering aspects of the project, parking studies, engineering studies, runoff studies, everything will be looked at by not only the applicant's engineer, but by an engineer that's selected by the planning board and that is paid for by the applicant. We've done that for numerous projects in the past, and it's worked very well. And, in addition to the planning board, this will be going to Board of Health for septic system. And there may be a little bit of conservation. I'm not sure yet if you have to go to Conservation Commission for anything you're doing yet, but if they're within that buffer zone, they do have to go to the Conservation Commission. So I just want to assure everyone that it will be going to many boards in town. The main one will be the planning board. And, it will be given its careful consideration. And, we've done senior housing now a couple of times in the recent years with Canterbrook and with Patton Ridge, both slightly smaller, but, Canterbrook was a 5-year process. And luckily Patton Ridge was a little bit quicker, but, we will give it our due diligence and allow much more public comment in the future when we have an application in front of us.
Brian, just can I make a couple of comments?
Of course.
I would like to make everyone aware that this meeting tonight is being recorded by HWCAM. They are our local closed access television station. They do store those. You can access that either by them directly on the web, or you can go through the town's website to go to HWCAM and get this recording as well. They have been providing that service to the planning board and the public for a number of years now, and we greatly appreciate their assistance. They certainly help provide us with better recall, and sometimes we have the ability to do unaided. So one quick question for Jill and Larry. Do you have an idea when you might make the formal submission?
Sure. We think we're going to be making the formal submission in about 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Very welcome.
And just so everyone knows, I'm sure most of you do, that every agenda is posted in Town Hall and also on the town website, a number of days in advance. So you'll be able to go on there and see what's on the agenda if you're not one of the noticed abutters. So anything else from any more members of the board before we move on? Okay. Again, thank you everyone for coming tonight, and we will be talking about some other things if you'd like to stay, but so thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your time this evening.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
All right.
Wow, that participant list is shrinking.
Well, yeah, no surprise. So on to 354 Highland Street. Jill, can you just kind of bring us up to speed where we're at with this, please?
I most certainly may. So basically in the Canterbrook subdivision, there's, I guess, a lot of power outages in that part of town. So a lot of the people who live there are seeking to put in generators. The permit doesn't necessarily prohibit them, but the interim building inspector, Rich Maloney, when he was reviewing the decision, reviewing the plans, felt more comfortable approving a generator if the board made a slight modification to the decision, simply saying, we will allow generators to be put in on site, subject to the condition that not only does the interim or whatever building inspector would be in place, as well as the town planner, Mr. Ruffett, had the opportunity to review the location, then those generators would be approved. And the only reason I gave, what I did give to the board, and I can share again if you'd like, I actually gave the board a generator location. But the reason why I kind of want to still say, let's make this more of a, I'm trying to make this a little smaller. Oof, that's wrong. I assume you're all seeing yourself right now. So the reason why I want to make this, are you guys now sharing my screen? Can you see it?
Yep, it's coming up.
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
there you
yeah.
go. I struggle. So here's just a typical location. So they're usually near the outside. They're always outside the units. They're always located in kind of close proximity to where the air conditioners would be, but also in a place that wouldn't affect the other unit. So we don't know exactly where they should be. You don't know where somebody may want something outside. So we're saying this is a typical location, but if we may have that modification that would basically allow Mr. Ruffett and whatever building inspector was then in place to say, yes, that's a good location, go ahead. That's all the modification would be. And then we clearly are asking that the board deem this type of a modification to be minor, so that simply the posting and then discussion during a public hearing and public meeting is sufficient and doesn't warrant a public meeting. And that's really it.
I have a question about this, Patrick. I mean, if we have, how many units in Kennebunk? 19?
23.
23. It's not going to happen very often, but when it does happen, and 23 generators kick on all at the same time. I mean, I've been around a Generac 12,000, and it's going to be a lot of noise. And the question I would ask is, when you have a project like this that's cluster zoned, and you're going to have, is it better to have 20 private generators stacked up outside of each house and have them all kick on at once? Or is there some way of having a communal power backup to handle power outages? It might be a lot less intrusive in terms of seeing all these generators. It might also be much less intrusive on the neighborhood in terms of noise, the half dozen times a year when they're actually used.
It is an interesting question. I mean, you're right. Assuming, let's say everybody wants to put one in at some point, you've got 23 generators running for however long, but we just haven't run across this before. That I can remember anyway, in a cluster area like this. But it's that's a fair point. But I mean, each unit has their own service, which I think is what would complicate one giant generator.
It is a big.
Yeah, but they all come in off a main line.
Yeah, they do.
And so, I mean, it's just something we might want to think about. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's worth thinking about, but one of the larger considerations is the fact that I fully expect I'll take my little street in Newburyport as an example. Probably only a quarter of the residents there have a generator, of this type. So I wouldn't expect all of the residents here and all of the units to have a generator.
So Jill, this is an option that buyers will have as opposed to something that's getting installed automatically because you've assessed that there's a need for it, or what's the?
As I understand it,
we do not offer it with the sale of the unit. These are individual unit owners. This actually was precipitated by a unit owner who bought, I don't know, in January or before that, who actually is interested in putting a generator in. And that's what stimulated the question.
And if I could add, first of all, as I think everybody knows, the generator is just a little bit bigger than the air conditioner. And most of them are set up about 18 inches from the home by code and 5 feet from any open window. But, and it's probably about 30% of the homeowners we anticipate will end up owning one of these. But it's really all about the power grid that's struggles in this area. And some homeowners have, because it's senior housing, they have need for medical equipment that just always have electricity. And most of the time, these are put in after the home is sold. There's a local company, I think, out of Raleigh, that is offering this at a fairly reasonable price. And we also have, if anyone has a generator in their home, knows it goes on once a week for 3 to 5 minutes for testing. And this particular vendor has them all going on, I believe, at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a Tuesday. So they all go on at the same time. So there has not been any complaints from one homeowner to the other that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I've got an observation to make on that. I've got a generator and we put it in about 2, 3, 4 years ago. And up to that point, there'd been a couple, 3 times that we really needed it and didn't have it. And since we put it in, we haven't needed it. I don't know what's going on here. You know,
Murphy's Law.
Murphy's Law. I get the
Murphy's Law.
need for the generator. My next door neighbor has just put one in also. But I see the problem as really a problem with the service, the power service that causes the outages to occur. I don't know what the problem is, but there seems to be some kind of a deficiency. On the other hand, it seems to have gone away.
Well,
there's a reason for that, right? This is Bill from, if I could speak, Bill Olson, Selectman, 419 Highland Street. But National Grid have been working very hard with National Grid to improve service. A lot of it's been tree downage. They've been actually taking trees down over the last 3 years up and down the main lines. That's definitely improved service. So that's one of the reasons you're seeing the lack of power outages. So it seems to be more major issues than just tree downages, which it was for years in this area. So, yeah. But National Grid has been working very hard to keep to get our service more consistent.
No, agreed. And, Richard, I hear you. When we first moved here 11, 12 years ago, we used to lose power a bunch. So I bought a portable generator, didn't really need to use it maybe more than once in 5 years. And then over the last 2 or 3, I live downtown, we've lost power a little more frequently than we used to over the last year or two. So
that's interesting.
It just varies. It varies.
I get that.
If I may make a pitch, this will become less and less of a problem as we adopt electric cars, because you can have a reverse charger in your garage, which basically, when you lose power, will suck power out of the battery of the car.
Yeah, but how long?
And most cars have enough power to actually run a house for a day or two.
Yeah.
And you don't have to do anything. All you have to have is the right kind of connection back into the power, so that you have to have a 2-way converter, so you can go from DC to AC as well as AC to DC.
Yep. Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah, it's really it's actually quite clever when you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, you can buy battery storage now and have that installed in your garage as backup, without having an electric car.
And then the batteries get charged from the power source.
Correct.
When power goes back on, then the car gets repacked.
Yeah, I mean, unless it's more than a day, then it's an issue. But or 2. But so what does the board think here? I mean, I don't think we can.
Can I say something? I'm a resident at Canterbrook.
Yeah, please identify yourself.
Paul Smiley. I just moved in here a week ago, and the last week we lost power 3 times.
Wow.
And one of the board members said they have a generator, but they haven't used it. So how can you say that we can't have generators if you have a generator and have used it?
No one said that.
Well, he was saying he's questioning whether we're allowed to have generators, but we lost power 3 times over the last week.
I wasn't questioning that at all. I was just simply being anecdotal in the observation. We haven't used it.
But I don't know how you cannot allow us to have generators if everybody else in a private home can have a generator without questioning.
Paul, I think you're jumping to a conclusion that's not been substantiated by the board yet. So
Yeah,
I would urge you to let us talk about this and do so without rancor. Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, I've got neighbors, I'm surrounded by people with generators. So I get it.
Yeah,
And
I don't have any issue with it. Yeah, for, you know, whatever time there'll be eight or 9 or 10 generators running in a power outage. I mean, it is what it is. You know, I hear them around my area too. So, you know, I guess I don't think there's any reason we should deny a condo development from having a generator when everyone else can have one by right.
Absolutely.
I agree.
Can I make a suggestion that probably the first vote that the board should take is a vote that this is a minor amendment?
Yep.
May I interject something as a resident that lives nearby Canterbrook?
Sure.
My name's Jean Morand. I live on 21 Garfield Avenue, which is off of Asbury Street near Cutler School. I definitely lose power less often than many people in Hamilton. So I'm going to suggest that Canterbrook or National Grid, or there's something wrong down there, because I don't lose power 3 times in 1 week. I mean, I lose it very rarely. So I feel there's something wrong. Something's going wrong down there that needs to be addressed by National Grid. Just want to put that.
There's a lot of different grids around town, and you know, most of the time when there's a power outage at my house, I can look down the street and Railroad Ave is fully lit up. You know, it's a block away, so it just everything's parsed out differently around town, and it's a little surprising you lost power 3 times at Canterbrook this past week, just given the reasonable weather that we've had. But
No, I know. We just lost last night for an hour.
Yeah, that's
It is surprising. My other comment has, but I'm sure this is not the planning board area, but has anyone ever looked at air pollution from generators if you have a lot in a small area? I'm just throwing that out as something to be considered.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah, thank you.
That's an interesting point.
Okay.
Well, most of them are actually powered by propane now, which is fairly clean. As
Natural gas.
Ours is
Yeah,
propane.
gas or propane, as opposed to sometimes they used to be powered by diesel.
Diesel. Any other comments from the board?
Oh, I'm okay with this. That's fine.
I'm fine with it. If the homeowners association doesn't have a problem with the generators, I don't think that the planning board should have one either.
Yeah. And as
I
long
agree
as,
with Marnie. If it's an internal problem, noise-wise, not an external problem, noise-wise, and if the externalities can assault them with noise just as the internal can the external, then fine, let them have generators.
I can speak to the homeowners association question. The homeowners association does review every request like this to make sure that it's not going to be intrusive on any other neighbor or member. And that's as well as asking the applicant or homeowner to submit to the town for the proper permitting, et cetera. So the homeowners association has no problem.
Thank you.
Julia, just one suggestion as a homeowner who's surrounded by probably a half dozen generators. Have the homeowner stagger their weekly testing schedule so they don't all turn on at the same time and run for, usually it's 20 minutes.
no, five.
It's 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. Sounds like longer. Maybe I'm
Like-
hearing multiple. I'm getting multiple. But anyway.
It's an interesting question though, because
There's
why would you want them all to stagger for a half hour or 40 minutes versus 1 5-minute interval?
Well, they could
yeah,
be
there's two
over
there's
several,
two
the whole
schools
week.
of thought of it.
It's tested once a week. There's 24 hours in a day. They could be staggered all day, all through the day and all through several days.
I mean,
I think there's a desire on the part of the condominium association to have an expectation of when they're going to actually trigger and cycle. So, and because it's a Tuesday at this particular time, they kind of like the idea that everybody knows this will be the time and it's done. It's not during the week. It's not during, a weird morning hour. It's a,
Or evening.
what
Yeah.
they've deemed to be, because it's only 5 minutes. So they really think that this is the best time and they prefer it all at once.
Yeah, we should, we
That's an
should
That's
defer
an
to them.
internal,
We should
that's an
defer to them.
internal decision.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, we're not going to specify when they need to do it.
Thank you.
So who wants to make a motion for the minor modification?
I make a motion that we agree that this is a minor modification to the Canterbrook.
I second that motion.
More discussion? Okay, all those in favor, Marnie,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Rick,
Rick Mitchell, aye.
Richard,
Richard Boroff, aye.
and Brian Stein is an aye. I saw someone waving.
Aye, also.
Sorry, Corey. I didn't see it on my screen. My bad. Okay, real quick. I saw somebody waving their hand. This will be our last comment. Maybe not. Okay. Okay, Patrick, now we just need to vote on allowing this modification. Is that?
Yeah, I've sent out paperwork that Jill was kind enough to prepare today. I've read through it. It basically has the decision set up in a way that the board can vote approval of the submission of Canterbrook Capital LLC on, let's see, as presented on the decision dated April the 5th of 2021.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Is that okay?
I just have a question. Are we now being asked to approve the document that's captioned 2021 minor modification?
Yes, ma'am.
That should be amended to reflect that it was a Zoom meeting and that we unfortunately did not meet at the Hamilton Town Hall Memorial Room. So,
I will make that change. That's an oversight. I apologize for that.
no problem. And also, I believe Dan Ham is not present. So those two
Yep.
corrections. So as modified, I have no problem.
I would also add that Chris Shepard.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, he's not
Yeah,
present.
he's not here either, is he?
Okay, was that motion okay, Joe?
Yep, perfect.
Okay. Any more discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor, Bill,
Bill Wheaton in favor?
Marnie,
Marnie Crouch in favor.
Rick,
Rick Mitchell, aye.
Richard,
Richard Boroff in favor, aye.
Corey,
Aye.
Brian Stein is an aye. It's unanimous.
I'm going to sign off quickly. I apologize, but I have a hearing in North Reading. Thank you very much for everybody's time. I look forward to seeing you in a few weeks on the Chabaco Hill project. Thank you
Jill,
again.
Thank you, Jill.
Jill, you have to stop sharing first.
I'm going to. I'm going.
Okay.
Good to
Thank
see you,
you.
Jill.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Relative to this decision, I'm going to need to have the members come in and sign. So I'll print it out tomorrow. I'll have it on the desk in the selectmen's chambers. If town hall is not open at a convenient time, just let me know. I can open up for you and make sure you've got the ability to make your signature as conveniently as possible.
Thanks, Patrick. Okay, moving on, review and discussion of our flexible residential zoning bylaw that we've been working on for a number of months. Patrick, you just want to bring us up to date, and I guess since we have still a fair amount of people online here, maybe just a quick overview of where we are and what we've been doing, please.
Sure. The town has, through a fairly significant planning process, as we prepared the residential master plan a couple of years ago, as we prepared the housing production plan, we had a consultant who worked with us, worked with residents here in the community, held workshops, undertook surveys, gained a lot of information, came to a number of public hearings throughout the process. And through that, we basically came to a number of areas where it was apparent to the planning board and the town and the public that we needed to make some changes regarding existing zoning. One of the major things that we wanted to be able to do is to accommodate zoning that provides more flexible development ability than the typical standard A&R or approval not required development, which is a lot here, a lot there, a lot elsewhere, or the typical subdivision grid that a lot of developers like to do. Our approach as part of that discussion process was a desire to be able to look at the natural amenities of sites here in Hamilton and to be able to work with those amenities in a reasonable, prudent way that would allow developments to go forward in a proactive fashion, not in super dense fashion, but in a means that would allow us to diversify our housing stock, to allow for smaller units, allow for duplexes and other types of development approaches, rather than, as I say, the standard approaches that has been the case here in Hamilton. So, this is a bylaw that the board has been working with now for about, but I guess it's about 9 months or so. We've made a lot of changes to it. We did have this suggested to us by a very esteemed, accomplished land use attorney, Mark Bobrowski, here in Massachusetts. He's probably the #1 land use attorney when it comes to creation of zoning bylaws and novel zoning approaches. So he had prepared this, presented it to us a number of years ago. We did not take it further at that time. However, our community to the south, Wenham, did. So we've taken that bylaw, we've made a number of changes to it. The board has, wrestled with the idea of, what are the appropriate density approaches to take? What are the appropriate kinds of levels of open space that we should be focusing on as part of it, and other kinds of individual items within zoning that either make or break how a zoning can work for you or against you. And I think that we've made a lot of improvements to it. We have worked with some residents. We've worked with a number of developers who've been part of the community over the years through various projects, who have scrutinized the language and help us to refine it. We're not finished yet. We do intend to continue to make refinements. We do continue to want to gain more improvement to it through a public hearing process. So we don't expect to take it to town meeting this spring, but there's a pretty great likelihood that we would this fall. So I'll stop with that.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate one of your last points was we have to take it through a public hearing process, and that will be quite a number of meetings, I believe, gathering public comment. As Patrick said, we've been working on it for the better part of 8 or 9 months as a board, and a few people here and there have chimed in along with the developers that Patrick mentioned. But there's still a long way to go, garnering as much public comment as we can, on it before it goes to town meeting. And as people that have lived in town for a number of years have seen, it's obviously not a sure thing to get a bylaw passed, at least the first time at town meeting. As Rick always reminds us, senior housing bylaw took 3 tries, and a few other bylaws that took 2 or 3 tries as well over the years. So it's really about getting it right for the town, and getting as much input as we can from as many people as we can in town. That's our goal, and it will be properly advertised and noticed, and then ideally put out in as many ways as possible to again get as many involved from the public as we can during those public hearings. So
Ryan?
Yes, Rick.
And we talk about the process, because I think, and other board members correct me if I'm wrong, I think we're feeling fairly confident that the draft we have now is ready for prime time.
Rick, before we discuss that process, I have several points to make, and they're really clarifications, because I noticed that there was a discrepancy in the minutes and my notes. So I just want to corroborate a few decisions that the board made at our last meeting, so that we actually do have something that's pretty final. And right now, there are just a couple of questions. So if you all will bear with me. In section 8.1.2, my notes indicate that we eliminated the assemblage prohibition.
We did.
Correct. Okay, good. And then in the minutes, there was a reference to the deletion of sections 8.1.22 and 8.1.23. We did not delete those sections.
Wait, can you reference what those are, Marnie?
Sure.
Just to remind us.
Yeah. I don't even, so 8.1.22 is the ownership and maintenance of open space. And section 8.1.23 is the public access to open space within the flexible development.
Okay, and those were those sections required the maintenance and allowed public access.
Right, and the minutes do reflect that we deleted them, but we did not. My notes don't indicate that to be the case.
Okay, thank you.
And then there's another question I had with respect to section 8.1.25. And I noticed this when I was doing the draft of the bylaw that's now before us. And what I discovered is that there's a typographical error in the senior housing bylaw that's the model for 8.1.25. And that is with respect to a definitive subdivision plan. So in the senior housing bylaw, there's a reference, it's 8.2.26 of the senior housing bylaw. It says a design plan shall be considered neither a subdivision plan under the subdivision control law, nor a site plan subject to the provisions of section 8.26. there is no section 8.26. So in our version of the bylaw, I referenced section 10.6 of the bylaw, which is, I think, let me just get the bylaws here. Section 10.6 is site plan review. So that's what I inserted. So if anybody wants to take issue with that, please advise me and I can make whatever changes. Patrick, you might know the genesis of the senior housing bylaw reference, but it's clearly a mistake. And then the final question that I had, and this is directed to Bill Wheaton, are you satisfied with section 8.1.9, which includes the matrix? Because
I'll have to
this
look
is
at
your work product.
the one I sent around.
I inserted it into the draft.
That one had all the corrections that Barry picked up.
Yep. And so the version of the bylaw that's dated March 17th, which was one day after our meeting, I took your version of the matrix and the discussion points that were made at the meeting and incorporated it in 8.1.9. So speak now if there's a problem, because I can make a further amendment to it if necessary.
No, the changes just involved inconsistencies. We didn't
Yeah,
change.
I mean,
any-
what
yeah,
what
we
you
didn't change any
provided
policy.
us, I inserted into the matrix. The only change I made was to the type of font. I didn't change any numbers.
Okay. Anything else from the board?
Yeah, so maybe we can get back to process, and I'm just thinking, this is a detailed bylaw that's going to require a fair amount of review and discussion by both the board and general public. And then we're looking at starting in potentially 3 to 4 weeks, a very rigorous and long review of the 133 Essex project, which could stretch out for many months. So I'm wondering how we deal with the two very important issues.
I'll make a suggestion, because there, and you know, again, it's more an idea, but because both of these projects, so to speak, for the planning board, 133 Tobacco and this bylaw are going to involve so much public input, perhaps we should not try and deal with them simultaneously, but have a meeting for one, you know, as one of our meetings in a month, and then a meeting on the other as the other meeting in a given month. And then we can have as much time as necessary instead of trying to address both of them at the same time.
I think that's a good idea, but I don't think it's going to work, because I think what's going to happen is that primarily for 133 Essex, as time goes by, we're going to have to make decisions so that the project can go forward piece by piece, and not, I don't think that the discussion of the bylaw changes should hold up what's going on with 133 Essex.
No, but I might suggest.
Let me interject something. Typically, you know, and Brian did mention this as we were discussing 133 Essex, is that all of the major technical areas of that project will have a peer or a consultant from the applicant provide a work product, like a traffic study or a water study, a civil, you know, infrastructure study, you know, those kinds of things. When those come to us, we then have to have an engineering scientific company do their evaluation, which is going to take, often 3-4 weeks to do before they come back to the board with, a product that they can present. So they're going to be, these spans of time through that process that would give us the potential to alternate between the two efforts, if you will.
So what you're saying, Patrick, is we need to be flexible.
Well, we need to be flexible, but it's going to be taking time, no matter what, because, the board has to have technical work product to respond to, and it takes time for the applicant to prepare it, to be happy with it, and then to get it to our, peer review consultant who will manage, and then they have to create their review product. So, you're talking about weeks at a time to do that.
Yeah, no, you took the words out of my mouth, Patrick. There's going to be, as we've seen from other projects, there's always, off meetings on those large projects where we can do other things. And I think we'll just have to play it by ear as we go forward. Yeah, there might be meetings back to back every couple of weeks on 133, but and most of the time there won't be. So those off meetings we can use for other things, including the bylaw and public hearings. Yeah, I mean, the one thing we will have to do is, the first one is obviously has to be noticed and, at a certain date and time, obviously. And then from that point on, we can continue it. And,
Can I interject a suggestion here?
Yep.
I'm not sure everybody's going to like this, but the two bylaws are not that different. The flexible bylaw and the senior housing bylaw. They both, set out goals, and they both allow clustered, dense development.
Sure.
And if in fact 133 Essex is going to prove to be controversial, that if we're in the middle of a series of hearings on that, and at the same time we're proposing another bylaw which allows more development like that, that's not going to augur very well for getting that new bylaw through town meeting. And I'm just, I would hate to, I think the flexible zoning bylaw stands a better chance of getting approved if it can be separated in time and space from 133 Essex. And I don't think we can speed it up, we could slow it down. But I'm just saying, if we're holding hearings on the flexible bylaw at the same time, there are 100 people there this evening, are looking at, opposing the senior housing development that looks pretty similar. We might be, destroying our own best chances.
I would agree with you, Bill. I think that the two are going to get intertwined and not in a productive and objective, thoughtful.
That's exactly the way it's exactly.
I agree with you as well, Bill. I think you're absolutely right. Absolutely right.
Also, I think there's an opportunity here. We're going to be engaging in a master plan. Probably the consultants are going to be hired by the end of this month. And so there's going to be an in-depth analysis of the town's, all sorts of parts of the town in terms of its infrastructure, its housing, its open space, its cultural and historic resources, and its financial sustainability, and how all those are intertwined. So that process might be helpful to be going forward. Doesn't mean we have to stop, but I think that would probably help the discussion about what are the options we should be looking at. And we might even get the consultant to take a look look at first of all, we have to have our legal counsel review the draft that we approve. Then we might have the consultant take a look at it in terms of, is this something they have seen before, and do they have any comments on it to improve it or whatever, and then let that whole process just play out. And then, as Bill said, is just bring it up when, there's more of a consensus of where the town wants to go.
I would love to get 133 behind us before we
dive in.
Pile this onto the town agenda. I actually think there are a lot of features of 133 that are actually pretty good, but there's a lot of opposition, and some of it's, as you say, Rick, it's always nobody ever wants any development near them, but I would like to. I think we might go through this. This is a big development, and we might get this out of the way before we can review it and so on, but before we bring it before the public, the flexible zoning bylaw, it might be better to get 133 out of the way.
Absolutely agree.
Okay, so you've got 3 people that agree with you.
Basically, yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to ask about how do the other members feel?
I tend to agree.
I mean, it's interesting because you'll probably never have more people on a call to talk about a bylaw than you will, on a night of 133 Essex. So you want to talk about public input, there you go. But I mean, obviously I see your point as well, Bill. And I mean, I won't be there anyway. At least as a planning board member, but.
Oh, so you'll be outside throwing rocks at us, right?
That's right. Oh yeah. Peppering you with questions.
Corey, how do you feel?
My feeling is that the 133 Essex opposition is site specific and less bylaw specific to the senior housing. It's more the application of that specific bylaw to this specific site. And so it's not particularly aligned with any opposition you'd see with 133 Essex, or sorry, with the flexible zoning development bylaw. However, they do coincide. My opinion is that I don't see the need to divide them, but I also don't see the need to stand against you guys in agreement on that, because I see them different enough to where the input's more helpful than hurtful, but I also see your point on keeping them separate for focus.
No, I agree with you. They are different, and I think you're right on, that site is, part of the major opposition. Obviously, it's not so much the bylaw. However, I think that a lot of people will intertwine them in some way. We've seen that in the past with various things, and whether it's right or not, it doesn't really matter. But I don't know. I can go either way on it, but
I guess that's my feeling too. I can go either way. I don't need to say no, we should keep them separated, or no, we should keep them together.
Yeah, and I agree with Rick on the whole master plan process. I mean, obviously we had done the housing master plan not too long ago, so and from that standpoint, I don't feel the need to hold it up based on that. However, the rest of the master plan needs to get done. So, that will have an effect on other things that, the bylaw talks about a little bit. So, from that standpoint, I don't mind holding it up based on that.
Yeah, I think the master plan's actually going to set the table, probably in a productive discussion, because one of the aspects of the consultant that the team is reviewing is their public participation sign, and to get as many people involved in a discussion about the town and what they envision the town to look like, how they expect the town to finance its schools and town services and protect open space, and what kind of housing and development is going to support that. So I think it actually could be a productive discussion, as that evolves. to bring that up and say, hey, here is a, what's the shovel-ready bylaw that may address some of these concerns. And so I think it's a good idea. Plus, we're talking about the summertime.
Yep.
And thinking that we can get this done in a good public participation way for town meeting in the fall could be a bit difficult. And I don't want to get into that position where we bring it up at town meeting and say, well, I didn't know anything about it, because they were on vacation. And we know July 4th, everybody is going to disappear. They are going to go on their vacation because they are desperate to do so. So I don't want to kind of like have this done without full exposure. And
Well, it also gains credence a little bit if the timing is such that this comes after the master plan. Then you say, well, we had all this engagement around the master plan, and this was one suggestion that came out of it.
Right.
I just and hopefully 133 will get approved or whatever modified or approved before that.
Okay. Yeah. No, I can go either way on it, but I don't have an issue postponing it.
Well, I think that the point that I see that makes me want to consider the flexible development bylaw later is the fact that so much open space is being preserved, on paper at least, at 133 Chabaco. But even though at least 48 of the 66 acres is being protected, the development still has garnered substantial opposition. So
the other thing I didn't realize is that there were no pre-existing easement trails on the land. People had just been tromping through there, on their own. And here the developer says, well, I'm going to make this actually, legal now. I'm going to put a system of trails in.
Let's not talk about this.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Let's wait until we have the public hearing. So shall we, we can certainly have our legal counsel take a look at this, Patrick. I think that would be the next step.
Right.
Just to, not that Marnie hasn't caught everything and that she hasn't used her sharp legal mind to capture and perfect the document, but I'd like a sort of independent, objective, legal opinion. Does this make sense, and is it legally constructed the right way?
And the other aspect of this flexible zoning bylaw is that we do have certain things that we have to define.
Yes. So,
that's a job in and of itself.
Yep.
Those environmental enhancements are and that type of thing.
Yeah. So that's something we might think about working on. Let's assume that the basic elements stay in place. We want to start working on regulations.
Right.
Yep. Okay. We good to move on?
I think so.
Okay.
Consensus is to wait.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on, Patrick, the potential zoning change in and around downtown and Winthrop School site. Can you just bring us up to date on that, please?
Right. We have discussed the idea of extending the business district northward from where it now is. We have a very small downtown, as most people are aware. Our business zone and district sort of tracks that currently in a fairly tight land area. What the board has been pursuing is the idea, as I'd mentioned, of extending the zoning district for business to include the Public Safety Building, Council on Aging property, as well as the Winthrop School property. Request has been made that we make a requirement for a 100-foot buffer, which has been added. And you'll see that on the zoning concept B page that I've sent out to the board members about a week or so ago. You'll see that 100-foot tree buffer requirement at the edge of the, that'd be the northeasterly border and the southeasterly border behind Winthrop School as well. This is basically, part of it is a very thick pine woods that is a nice buffer between the school and the neighborhood back there, close to Horseshoe Lane, as well as Locust Street in that area. So we would continue to have the benefit of that and make that an element of zoning concept B.
So last time, I think it was, we talked about actually, having a buffer, yes, but having the town, well, again, way down the road, if whatever happens with the property, if the town were to, potentially sell it through an RFP process, that the town would still own that buffer.
Yeah.
Is that what you're still thinking, that we were still thinking? Okay.
Yeah, I would absolutely advocate for that. I think that, it still gives a very sizable piece of property. We didn't scale out and calculate how much of a deduction of the overall acreage that would be, but I could do that between now and the next meeting.
Yeah, that's fine.
So, and Brian, you had mentioned doing an A&R on that piece. Does that make sense? Is there any way we can codify that 100-foot buffer so that it becomes part and parcel of some kind of legal designation before we bring this to a town meeting?
Well, bring what to town meeting?
We are talking about expanding the commercial district.
I just wanted to clarify what you were talking about.
So, and naturally, neighbors are going to be concerned about how are they going to be protected, and how, what's the buffer and what kind of screening, all those kinds of questions. And I think we should be able to answer that and say, as part of this expansion, we are codifying a 100-foot buffer as described by Patrick, so that it's not something that we're saying, oh, that will be done, 10 or 15 years. We're going to do it now, so we give people assurance that they are protected.
Yeah, I agree with you that we should. However, I wonder, given that there's, the lease on the property with the school system for however long that is still, I don't know if there's any complication with doing any kind of, an A&R now or something that at least, keeps that buffer in place no matter what happens. But that's I'm not a lawyer, so that's something for town council to opine on. Potentially.
Playground and the fields both would overlap, at least the northeastern border.
What's that?
There's playground and fields that would probably overlap that northeastern border.
Well, the town still owns it.
Right.
So
Correct.
It's the underlying ownership is still there. So the town can do pretty much what it wants in terms of zoning, as long as it's not restricting the usage. But as you said, we're not lawyers, so Patrick, maybe you can parse that out with a legal mind and find out if that's something that we can do in advance of bringing this forth.
Yeah, the property doesn't change at all until well
Right.
down the road. It's just a line on a piece of paper, and it's the same ownership of both parcels at that point. But
Right, it becomes part of a deed.
how that has to work with anything, any legal documents or whatever that we have with the school system, I don't know.
You'd have to look at the lease and see how the leasehold is defined.
Yeah.
And if it's defined in terms of lot size, then the town would be precluded from doing anything until the lease was terminated.
Well, but they could still have, the town owns both, would own both.
Oh, yeah, but in terms of.
But you're right, we just need to make sure. Yeah. Patrick, is there, I don't know if, if you've talked to anybody there, town manager, anybody, any of the selectmen that, some of them have talked about this whole thing for a while, but have you talked to them about this division and potential buffer, and then the town, in the future, if it does get, if part of that land does get sold, that the town would hold that other land? Has that been discussed?
Yeah, that element of it has not, but I certainly can. I think, there's been a bit of hesitancy in responding to it because it's, out there a few years and with more impending things to deal with. And plus, we don't have a perfectly clear notion of what we want to do.
Right.
Anyway, so I haven't been able to extend that request to town council and the town manager yet.
Yeah, I know, talking to Sean Farrell, chair of the Board of Selectmen, and to the FinCom, they are very much in support of this. And the lease for that with the regional school system is coming up within the next year or two. So that could be, if it's an impediment, that could be negotiated as an amendment to that lease. So I think the time is perfect to be moving on, keep moving this down the line, because the powers that be in terms of the Selectmen and the FinCom would like to see that that progress continue.
Good.
Great. So there's no real urgency given the lease.
Oh, but it would be nice to get clarification whether we.
On that, yeah, of course. Yeah. But I mean, there's no real urgency to bring this to town meeting at any point in the near future.
No.
Okay. Okay. Anything else from anybody on that? Okay. Moving on to board business. Patrick, I believe we have one potential alternate associate member on tonight.
Actually, we have two gentlemen with us tonight, Jonathan Poor, as well as Emil Dahlquist, have both been attending patient.
Yes, and thank you for your patience.
We thought we'd make you sit through a real planning board meeting of some length. So this is a minor hazing, if you will.
Not the first time, but thank you for inviting me.
Thanks for coming.
I do want to say, just to add one thing quickly, and because of your rezoning conversation, I think I've seen very little of what's being proposed, what the vision is for that area, but in my opinion, I think that's got tremendous potential, maybe the most important thing you're going to do for the next 20 years. So I think it's an excellent project.
Are you talking about the expansion in the commercial district?
Yes, right.
Oh, right.
Yep.
So, Brian, do you want to sort of walk us through our discussion with Emil?
Yeah, I mean, typically how this works with both you and Jonathan. I'm sure you're aware of what kind of an associate member does, but I'll just lay it out real quick. Mainly, we love input from everybody that's on the board, whether they're a full voting member or not. An associate member is typically only a voting member during a special permit process if one of the full members has not been able to attend the required number of meetings, or goes off the board for whatever reason, we have those, one or two backups that, hopefully have been in attendance at all the meetings and can then vote on special permits. So that's generally the role of the associate members. I'm sure you're aware.
Yes.
And typically, tonight, the board members and I can ask you some general questions, but I think first, we typically, have each member or each potential member just kind of state who they are, their background a little bit, and why they'd like to become a member of the planning board. So I guess Emil, you can feel free to go ahead.
Okay. Well, I've been in architecture for 50 years now, and recently moved up into Hamilton from a town called Simsbury in Connecticut, just outside of Hartford, where I was there for a number of years. And I got involved in local town affairs as a volunteer, chaired their design review board for 20 years, chaired the Building Code Board of Appeals for 20 years, assisted with the Planning Commission writing the Plan of Conservation and Development, which is a 10-year project that the state of Connecticut instituted or mandates that every municipality has to prepare a comprehensive report on what the town is doing, what its vision is for the future, and all of that. And we did a very interesting, I think, POCD, a Plan of Conservation and Development. I chaired a design committee for the downtown area, helped set up, wrote design guidelines for the town of Simsbury, which was a set of design standards to be followed throughout the town. And that was a project that got an award by the landscape architect professional organization in Connecticut, Frederick Law Olmsted Award to the town of Simsbury. So that turned out to be a really neat kind of project to work on. And then got involved in preparing a town charrette, which you may or may not be familiar with, but it's an intensive study over a 1-week period where you do really visioning. It's a visioning process about what you want your town to be. And then you sort of coordinate with a multidisciplinary group of professionals, architects, landscape architects, economic experts, and so on to see how the town could benefit by going through a transition from conventional zoning into a different process, which we ultimately did. And what was really important is that we got a tremendous number of people in town interested in this project. They really turned out for all of these presentations, and they were fully behind it. And that's really key to get the public involved if you want to get it implemented. So you don't find all of this opposition to whatever the vision is. And then lastly, in that we decided to work with a professional group, and they were out of Colorado, to come in and assist us in preparing what's called a form-based code. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but it's, as an architect, what I found is that the first thing you get a project in a town, the first thing you do is go to town hall and you pull a set of zoning regulations and you look at it. And they're great in some ways, but they're so outdated and they're so cumbersome. And I think anybody would agree, they're really blunt tool for planning a community. So after working with a number of towns, and incidentally, the zoning code, I won't go through it, as you all probably know, they were written maybe 100 years ago, just under 100 years ago. And the pretty much adopted over a period of time, but the basis for all of it was use. And the basis was to separate all of the uses. We're going to put all our business over here. We're going to put all of our industrial over there. And there were good reasons to do it at the time in the 1920s. But I think they found as time went on and as more communities adapted the same set of codes, because your code is very similar to what you're going to find in Wenham, probably Beverly and Danvers and all the surrounding communities. But what they found over time was that a lot of the results they were getting from the codes were unintended, and they're not really what people liked or wanted. So through some, around the 1980s, 90s especially, up to 2000 or so, there was kind of an interesting movement going on throughout the country in terms of coming up with this form-based code. It came out of the Congress for New Urbanism, and it was really a fascinating way to look at it. It took the use concept, which represents in typical zoning regulations about 80 to 90% of what zoning codes are about. And it took form as the opposing important determinant in preparing for town development. And it still had to keep use, of course, but it just emphasized form. And by form, it really is everything that you see on the landscape. If you walk through your town center, for example, what is it that you're looking at? You're seeing buildings of a particular size, of a proximity to each other, of a setback from the street. And all those things that put together are elements that produce a form. And I could go on for this for a long time, but the key there is to come up with a form-based code, of what we did in Simsbury for the downtown area. And it was sort of like your flexible zoning, but it became an overlay zone. And after going through this whole process, it was adopted by the zoning commission to be the dominant zone for the town center area. But in it, there's quite an elaborate means to look at what that form is about and why it's important to introduce that as part of your concept. And what it also does is it gives the general public a language that they can understand and they can see. And it's a very graphic kind of approach to zoning, so that they can see and understand and get involved in what is going on there, that would enable them to participate in a way that was extremely important for us to get it all implemented and passed. So those are some of the key things I worked on in Simsbury for about 20 years or so, but recently relocated up here and sort of left that behind. But it was, you could go on the website, Town of Simsbury, Connecticut, and you could look at their plan of conservation and development, which is something that I was instrumental in preparing. I don't know if you have that sort of plan here, but it sounded like you have a master plan of, at least in your area, you're considering to rezone as business. But I'd be very interested in find out, what stage that whole process is and what's going on with that. And I think in looking at your regulation, just again, very briefly, I think there's a lot still to be considered in doing that. So anyway, if I'm only a member of public, I probably will get involved in some way in this process. But in any case, that's sort of my reason to want to join the planning committee or planning board as an associate. I'm really not interested in an elected position, but as an associate, if I can get involved in a discussion, that would be, for me, the most important thing that could happen. So I would be very pleased to be able to assist you in whatever I can.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
I think we'll do introduction from Jonathan as well, and then we can ask questions of either or both.
So I do want to, before we do that, and Brian, if I'm out of order here, please let me know. Jonathan, you're a candidate for your position on the planning board and you're running unopposed.
Yes.
So I'm wondering why you would want to be an associate when you are almost assured a position on the planning board and the election is less than a month away. So by the time, let's let's say we thought you were a great candidate, and I'm sure you are, and we said we want the Board of Selectmen to approve you. By the time that happened, you would have been elected. And my concern here, and this is not, please don't take this the wrong way. I think you're a great candidate. I'm looking forward to you serving on the planning board. My only concern is if we appoint you as an associate, there's another application and we can't even consider that person. So I'm feeling betwixt and between here.
I understand. I guess I was taking a little bit of guidance from other folks and a little tiny bit of cue from Patrick, and was from my vantage point was sort of the understanding that it would just sort of get me oriented and involved a little bit sooner. But if it interferes with other broader interests, then I don't see that there's a strong reason to do that.
And I understand, and if this had actually happened like 3 months or 6 months earlier, that would have been wonderful. Because then you could have dived right in or dove right in and gotten your feet wet. And it's by no means am I saying anything negative here. It's a timing issue.
Totally understood.
Because we've got this very important project, 133 Essex, coming up. And we'd like to have 2 associate members on board, so that, as Brian said, if somebody misses more than 2 meetings, then an associate can step in and be a voting member. And this is a very important project, so you would be right up to speed. Any associate would be right in the thick of it. So I just want to make sure that we're fully staffed and prepared as we move into a very complex and probably and it will be controversial project.
Yes, so I definitely understand what the concerns and interests are, and I would definitely defer to what the wisdom of the board is on this. And my main interest is the success and effectiveness of the board. That's the whole game here, not what my particular interests are.
I hope you don't think I'm cutting you off here.
No, not at all.
No, I mean, I think you're right, Rick, in that, it's great to have all this interest and number of people wanting to be on the board, which, sometimes isn't the case.
Yeah.
We're usually scrounging for people, and we haven't had associates in a little while. So, from that standpoint, and from the fact that we do have a big project coming up fairly soon, and we do have a potential third, or another associate candidate that could then fill that second position potentially, and then you, as Rick said, are essentially assured of being elected, given you're running unopposed. I think it makes sense to consider the other potential candidate as another associate member, as well as Emil, and then you'll be a full member, within the next month or so, most likely. So, like Rick said, by the time the selectmen get around to appointing everybody, it'll be after the election anyway, probably. So, if you're good with that, I think the rest of the board will most likely be good with that. And so we can then move on.
That's fine. That's fine with me.
Okay.
Great.
So do we have the board have any questions for Emil?
I have a question. Could you just briefly compare Simsbury and Hamilton in terms of size and character? And
yeah, that's a good question. Simsbury is about 24,000 people.
Much bigger.
It's much bigger, yeah. But the other demographics are very similar to what you find in Hamilton in terms of it's a highly educated community, terrific school system, very desirable place to live, and very scenic, a lot of history to it, number of historic buildings, historic districts, and so forth. So it has a lot of similarities, although the size is quite different. But I think it's striking how similar they are in a lot of ways in terms of the the character of the individual towns. So,
Thank you.
I have one question, and this does happen from time to time where, a full elected member doesn't fill out their full term.
yeah.
And typically at that point, an associate member would step in and fill that until the next election. Is that something you'd be willing to do? And, if so, once that election came around, if you wanted to, would you run for that position?
Yes, I would. I just I just like the idea of being a volunteer, and the electing process is not something that interests me a lot. But but the answer is yes. Of course, I would. Yeah.
Okay. Good to know.
The election process could be very interesting at times.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
It would appear to me that you have much to offer the planning board. Thank you.
Well, thank you. But there's a lot. Again, another quick observation. There's a lot in this town that is worth preserving and building on. And the idea of, for us anyway, or my involvement in the past is, kind of an understanding that the place we live in and love and cherish as a place is a result really of great decisions made by people who came 20, 30, 40 years ago. And to be part of that process, almost a steward for a period of time, is an enormous responsibility. And I think it is something that is important, at least to me. And the other thing is that great towns don't just happen. They are the result of a lot of thought, a lot of decisions made, a lot of decisions not made. And that the other key thing is that every single decision matters. And that's one thing that I think, however big and however small, they really do matter in ways that will down the line become more evident, I think. One of the key things is what's going to happen with your traffic corridor, Route 1A. And that's very key to, the future. And, but there's a lot here, I think, to work with in terms of being a great town and to preserve it and maintain that character that it has. I think, so it would be great to be a part of that process. So, that would look forward to it if that were the case.
Great, thank you. You're eminently qualified and probably would be
thank you
more experienced than probably most of us on the planning board.
I'm thoroughly impressed with both gentlemen and the information they've provided us. I think both could make a vital contribution to the board.
Agreed.
So what's the process here? Do we want to make a decision on this, or do we want to, I hate to wait because time is of the essence.
I don't think there's I don't see any reason to wait, honestly. I know we need to meet the other candidate hopefully fairly soon at the next meeting, but I think there's no reason to delay on this right now, is there?
Good. And I make a motion that Emil Dahlquist be approved by the board and forwarded to the Board of Selectmen for approval.
I second that motion.
Let's vote on it.
Any more discussion on the motion? Okay, all those in favor, Richard?
Aye.
Marnie?
Aye.
Corey?
Aye.
Bill?
Bill Wheaton, aye.
Rick?
Rick Mitchell, aye.
Brian Stein's an aye as well.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Mr. Poor, since you're running unopposed, I think we can all say we look forward to working with you on the planning board as a full member.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
So will we be seeing lawn signs out there for you?
Possibly, yes. I've never run a canvassee before, so this is one thing that's completely outside of my wheelhouse. So I had a lot of coaching on it. So
Okay.
I've always sort of been asked to do things. I've never had to go sell myself to do things. So this is a new experience for me.
I don't think you have too much to worry about.
No, thank you both for stepping up and putting yourself out there a little bit and serving the town, hopefully for a while.
Thank you.
And leaving the board in good hands, I think. So
you're leaving. I didn't know that. But what would be the next step for me anyway? To see Patrick and I'd like to get kind of up to date on some of the things that are ongoing right now, so I can do a little preparation.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk to Patrick. We will be forwarding essentially a letter asking the Board of Selectmen to approve you, associate member, and they may have you come on to their next meeting, hopefully next meeting, and do the same thing you did tonight, probably just introduction, and then they'll take their vote.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to minutes from March 16th. Marnie, any issues?
Yes, but not mine. So on page 1, item 5, there's an error there. We decided to eliminate, not keep the assemblage language.
Yep.
And then on page 2, first line, item 8, we did not decide to delete sections 8.1.22 and 8.1.23. With those 2 corrections, I had nothing else.
Right. And that was the point you made earlier.
Yes, exactly.
Yep. Any other comments? Okay.
Motion to approve.
Second.
More discussion? All those in favor, Bill?
Bill Wheaton, aye.
Richard?
Richard Boroff, aye.
Corey?
Aye.
Marnie?
I, subject to those corrections being made.
Yes. Rick?
Rick Mitchell, aye.
Brian Stein is an aye. Patrick, you have introduce Asbury 40B project on here. Is that something you want to do, or can we wait?
Just very quickly, there are actually 2. I think that you probably heard me mention the project that's being proposed by Habitat for Humanity at 434, I believe it is, Asbury. We've talked about that a little bit. As I understand it, another 40B is being proposed by Harbor Light Community Partners at the Britton farm property, which actually is an abutter to Canterbrook on the north side. Right now, it's a fairly sizable hayfield, but that's the property where Harbor Light is proposing, and Marnie may have the paperwork on this as well, for, I believe that was a 50-unit project. I think that's like 3 stories. Is that right, Marnie?
It's 55 units, and from the schematic that I've looked at, it does look like it's 3 stories. And it's on the 4-acre parcel. We approved the A&R on that several months ago.
Right.
So it's, as I said, 55 units and on that 4-acre parcel. But that would go before the Zoning Board of Appeals. It's not before the Affordable Housing Trust. We are working with Habitat for Humanity with respect to the 10 units that it proposes to use to, well, the property to build 10 units of affordable housing. That's on about 4.5 acres, I believe.
Where's that going to be, please?
That's across the street from Canterbrook, approximately.
Okay.
Patrick, is there any further movement on Gordon Conwell?
As a matter of fact, the group is having a meeting with their developer, who is also Andrew DeFranzo of Harbor Light Community Partners, tomorrow at 11. So from the outcome of that meeting, I should have something that I can bring back to the board at our next meeting.
Okay.
I was thinking how interesting that the timing could be with what happens first, right? You know, ideally you'd have Gordon Conwell happen first, and then kind of
You would shut them down.
Well, right, but it's interesting it's the same developer.
Right.
So, and I had heard that Asbury Street at Britain's is, years away, but I mean, it would be anyway, but just given, potential litigation and so forth that usually happens with those. But it's just interesting. It's the same developer.
Yeah, and he's actually submitted his paperwork to the state.
For Britain's property?
Yes.
I wonder if that then means that Gordon is farther out than we would hope.
You know what? I wouldn't speculate. There's, so many decisions that have to go in to that size of project that I haven't been privy to, that, I really don't feel comfortable even prognosticating. But as I say, I hope to bring good news back to the board at our next meeting.
One significant difference between Gordon Conwell and the Britain property is Gordon Conwell is retrofitting existing buildings,
right,
versus new construction.
Right.
So that's a significant difference.
And
would affect the
It's
timing.
also a significant difference in the profitability of the project to the affordable developers, because they have access to incredibly cheap capital from the federal government when they're doing a 40B. So they don't mind spending that capital because it's very cheap. Once you understand how a 40B works with both front end and rear end subsidies, I can see they might actually have a preference to build fresh rather than retrofit. So, but we would like them to retrofit.
Right.
We would.
And just an update on Willow Street, they have completed demolition of 59 Willow, so that site is now almost completely cleared.
Right, and I've been attending via Zoom the closing calls with respect to that property, and I think the developer would, well, they're eager to close, and they would like to do it as quickly as possible. But I think we're looking about the third week in April for the loans to close on that development.
Okay,
great.
So maybe this isn't the time, but so given that those 18 units are approved and deemed affordable, is that going to have any bearing on any of these other 40Bs?
Well, we'll have a safe harbor for a year.
Well, will we though? I guess is the question for sure.
Well, the 18 units, when the building permit is issued, the full 18 units should go on the SHI. So
Right.
that would give us the safe harbor, at least according to the housing production plan.
Okay.
Why would that give us
So
the safe
then
harbor, isn't it?
then we would hope that Gordon Conwell, that gives us a little window to work with Gordon Conwell, right?
Right.
Let's sort of move along.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the state's decision whether it actually happens or not, right? Because we haven't been doing our 14 units a year for a while now. So,
Well, the housing production plan was only approved last year, I believe.
well, but previous ones were also the same.
Well, this, I think, would be the first year where we got sufficient number of units on the SHI at one time.
No, I know. I guess I guess I'm not totally clear on how the state looks at it. If you haven't been doing anything for the last 5 years and all of a sudden, boom, you do your required number of units, do they give you that safe harbor?
Oh, yeah, I think so. And if you have even more, you can get 2 years.
Right.
So, but actually how that works and how it's described in the housing production plan, I could just use the term amorphous. It's unclear to me exactly what that safe harbor does for us, how that really would work in practice.
And the fact of the matter is that, projects have such extensive time periods that are necessary to them, particularly in projects that are predicated on public funding. The Traeger project is a perfect example. How long did it have to wait for its financing? Right. A fairly lengthy period pushed that project out much longer than they certainly wanted. So I have every expectation, in that Harbor Light Community Partners is a nonprofit developer. They're going to be needing public funding for much of their project demands. So I fully anticipate their project to be taking several years to be able to do.
Yeah.
I would fully expect that to be the case on their Asbury Street project as well.
Right.
Okay.
Well, we might know more tomorrow, huh?
Yeah.
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 Let's see. All right.
Okay. Anything else, Patrick?
Let's see. We have Rick has mentioned we're working with the consultant for the master plan. We will, come to terms with that fairly shortly. We should have a report back to the board at our next meeting.
Great. Okay. Anything else from anyone?
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor, Rick,
Rick Mitchell, aye.
Marnie,
Marty Crouch, aye.
Bill,
Bill Wheaton, aye.
Corey,
Aye.
Richard,
Richard Boroff, aye.
Brian Stein is an aye as well. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Patrick.
Okay.
So just one last